So apparently, they have finally released the 4 stars that are coming on the Navia and Escoffier banners. Aha, let's see. Ooh, Auroran's coming back. Okay, so we have Aoife and Auroran. Best friends, definitely best roommates and nothing else. And then Layla. So this is kind of interesting. And then this for Navia too. Okay, so let's go over the 4 stars. Since I made a video on the 5 stars and kind of going over their strengths and weaknesses, I won't harp on that too much. I feel like Escoffier is going to be very useful. Even outside her niche, I think she's still going to be pretty good. And then Navia is a good damage dealer too. So these are both pretty solid. But let's go over the 4 stars here, because they're fairly interesting on these banners. We have Aoife, who is a 4-star Animo character that's also a healer, and he is sort of an Animo on-field driver. I think the way to look at Aoife is he's basically Mizuki, but potentially if you are wishing on either one of these banners and get a lot of his constellations, he's just going to end up being like a more useful slash better Mizuki, but that doesn't really mean he's going to be very good in general, but he'll probably be pretty fun. The fact that he can use Kakuku to fly and then also do some swirling while also just healing your team at the same time is kind of fun and kind of cool, but don't expect Aoife to be that strong. he's not designed to actually be that much of a really strong damage dealer, despite the fact that he uses a gun and shoots enemies. So that might seem a little bit deceiving, but if you're looking for someone who's doing a lot of damage on field, Aoife is definitely not that type of 4-star. He is much more of a character that you're using, and all the other supports and off-field damage dealers in your team are the ones that are contributing to your team's damage, not Aoife. So, one of those characters that actually works well with him is Auroran. And Auroran works because he's kind of like Fischl, but a little more AoE, and his passive is dependent on Night Soul or Night Soul and Electrocharge and other sort of reactions to fill his Night Soul gauge to let off his large AoE. So most of his damage actually comes from his passive effect. Auroran is pretty solid. He's a nice 4-star, much better with constellations. A C0 Auroran is fine, but the more constellations you get, the better. C4 is pretty solid. If you can get more than that, it's even better. But yeah, just even a single copy of him, which we did have that event that gave a copy of Auroran for free. So even getting like a C1 here, if you're wishing on these banners, is pretty nice. But overall, Auroran's a fairly nice 4-star. In terms of the 4 stars that Natlin has released, I would say Yansan is number 1, Auroran's number 2 in terms of like how good they are. And then Aoife is definitely lower than both of those two, but he's above Kachina, so there's that, I guess. He can hold the Scroll of Cinder City and has maybe some niche fun uses, a little bit more than Kachina, so I guess that's good. And then we've got Layla, who is a cryo shield character. She pairs very well with Escoffier. She's just a very solid shield character in general. Her skill lasts for a long time if the shield doesn't break. Once it disappears, you can immediately swap back to Layla and then just recast it again. Her burst is basically just a large field that does do some damage, but honestly not a lot. It's basically just there to apply cryo. So that's kind of what her burst is for, or like use triggering noblesse or something like that. You don't really need to use her burst for anything other than utility purposes. It's all about her shield. So yeah, this is pretty solid, and I like sort of the combo here, because if you're wishing for a Escoffier, you can get Layla, and then you've got another cryo, and if you've got Jingcho, and especially if you have Farina, then you've got like a very easy, chill team to play with a shield or a healer, and then your off-field Hydro. However, you could also just throw in like Kaya here and Barbara, and if you got Layla, you have a very free-to-play Escoffier team that'll be very solid. And then Auroran cons in general are just very nice. He doesn't really pair well with any of these characters. He would pair better with characters that want to deal electrocharge damage, so Hydro and Electro, because his Night Soul points will charge faster and his passive will trigger quicker if you're triggering electrocharge more frequently. And then Aoife doesn't really work with this like Escoffier. He does work well with Auroran, which is kind of nice. So Aoife and Auroran have pretty good synergy, but Aoife doesn't really have the greatest synergy with really anyone else. If you do want to play Aoife, having someone like Layla in the team is nice. She's not really going to do a lot of damage, but the fact that she can heal you, or the fact that she can shield you while you're flying, is pretty solid, because while you're floating, if you look at the way Aoife moves, he barely floats off the ground, and he doesn't really move that fast. Kind of like Wanderer, maybe a little bit slower. So that actually makes him a really big target, because he's just barely off the ground. So his hitbox is kind of extended upward, which actually makes him easier to hit, despite the fact that he's floating just barely off the ground. There's very, very few attacks that are just that low that he could actually avoid them. So it just kind of makes him a little bit taller of a target. And then at the same time, he doesn't move super fast. He's not like Nuvolette, who's very mobile while he's floating. He's a little bit more like Wanderer, who's much slower. And he doesn't seem like he's quite as fast as Chaska either, because Chaska has a lot more verticality. She gets much higher, and even though she's not super fast, she has that height and then that mobility to like move backwards and forwards at about the same rate. So it's easier to kind of move and dodge with her. I think Aoife is going to be a lot more vulnerable in the air than like people may realize. So having someone like Layla with Aoife could be pretty nice and pretty useful too. So these 4 stars don't really line up with Escoffier that well. They kind of work with each other decently. At least Aoife and Auroran work well. And then Layla's just kind of a nice 4-star to have on your account. It's not like these aren't crazy. These aren't super insane. This was not like the Varessa banner where we had really good 4-stars, but they're still like, they're solid. Mostly, I think if you wanted more copies of a character, the best one to get multiple copies of would be Auroran. Aoife, like, his kind of main shtick is kind of solid at C0. Even with lots of constellations, he does get better, but I don't think you're going to be playing him that often, even if you, unless you just really like him. I don't think he's going to be someone who, if you get C6 Aoife, you're going to be like, now my account is saved. If you just want him to play him like one copy is fine. He's not someone like Gaming where from C0 to C6 they become a completely different character and like an absolute monster. So yeah, Layla cons, they're not really that good. One that's kind of nice is her, I think it's her C1, that makes her shield also work in co-op. So your teammates, your co-op player, friend, also gets her shield when she uses it, even though they get it for less time, and it's not it's not as strong for that reason. But they still get some shield in co-op, so that's kind of nice. The rest of her constellations aren't really too impactful, honestly. And then, ooh, interesting here. And again, for like Navia, like Aoife and Navia, you wouldn't want them together. Aoife's going to take too much on field time, and he's not going to help with Crystallize. Layla could help with Crystallize. She is an element that can work with the Crystallize reaction. So Geo and Cryo would make the Cryo Crystallize shard, so that could work for Navia. You could put Aurora in here too, and you could run like Jingcho and Auroran and have like some sort of electro charge reaction while also getting the Crystallize shard for Navia. So like, that could work too. So they're both kind of okay with her. Generally, if you're going to play Navia, I would recommend using Bennett and Xiangling, because Navia gets the big attack boost from Bennett, so does Xiangling. Xiangling's Pyronado from her Elemental Burst can cause a reaction on every hit, which means you can get a lot of Crystallize shards pretty fast for Navia. So generally, that's the 2 4-stars I would recommend pairing with her, but these two are okay if you don't have, let's say, Bennett, or if your Xiangling's not built for the time being, you could use these two, so they're okay with her. Now, let's talk about the weapons. Symphonist of Sense, Verdict. Then we've got Prospector's Drill, Widsith, or no, is that? Yeah. Widsith, Range Gauge, Prospector's Drill, Portable Power Saw, and Dockhand's Assistant. Interesting. So, generally, let's talk a little bit about the 5-stars first, and then I'll talk about the 4-stars, because those are kind of interesting. The spear, our big like devilish looking fork, it's even got the little devil wings there. It's actually very solid. It is a spear that gives you crit damage, and then it also increases your attack when the equipping character's skill hits an opponent. I believe. I think it's skill, and it's by like 28%. Generally, pretty good spear if your character wants crit damage and like wants attack, and they're using their elemental skill to attack opponents pretty frequently. So just generally fairly nice spear, having a good like 5-star crit damage spear, if at nothing else, is a good stat stick. It's really obviously very good for Escoffier. Obviously, it's her best in slot. Is it necessary for her? I don't really think so. What it does over other spears is it makes her personal damage go up quite a bit. However, Escoffier really wants to use her burst off cooldown, so you do need a certain amount of energy recharge on her depending on what team you're running her in and how many cryo characters are in that team. Usually around like 140 you'll be safe. If you're running her with like 3 cryo characters, you basically have no energy recharge requirements, and at that point like you can use her spear with her and like not have barely any ER, and you'll be fine and not even worry about using her burst off cooldown. But if she's like the only cryo character in the team, then you'll want higher energy recharge, and this might be not necessarily a great choice, or you'll need to get a lot of energy recharge from your artifacts. So if that's something that you don't really want to play around with or anything like that, you can run a Favonius Lance on her. If you get the Battle Pass, the Deathmatch, the spear that gives you a lot of crit rate and also attack percent as a passive, is also very good for her. So that's like there are other options. So if you wanted Escoffier to do more damage, then this is really good for her, but you still need to make sure that you get those energy recharge requirements where they're at, because her burst is very, very important to her kit overall and just your team health in general to make sure they're alive. So pretty solid weapon overall, just being a crit damage spear, and also like that attack percent boost is pretty nice, and obviously very good for Escoffier. But depending on the situation, it may not be her best. In a lot of other situations, you may just want to use Favonius instead. Then we've got Verdict, which is a higher base attack claymore with 22 crit rate and 674 base attack at level 90. It looks really cool. It is a battle axe that is also somehow a claymore, and is very fancy. And then its passive is really only useful for Navia, and I guess maybe Noelle or potentially Ito. We're giving you extra attack percents when you get the crystallized shards. So that's yeah, works well for the Geo Claymore characters. Best for Navia. The main thing about this that's really helpful is actually that it's more or less a stat stick. It's not so much the passives, but Navia really wants a lot of crit rate, because you don't want to not crit her elemental skill. It feels really bad because pretty much all of her damage is built up into that skill that you need several seconds to build up and get all those shards and then aim and fire at an enemy. And if it doesn't crit, it feels like you just wasted all that time. So you really want high crit rate with her. So getting this weapon, or even a battle pass weapon, if you do get the battle pass like the Serpent Spine, is really nice, because this one gives 22 crit rate and the Serpent Spine gives 27. So having the crit rate on her weapon makes building her just a lot easier, because you don't need as many crit rate rolls on your artifacts, because that is, as we all know, complete RNG, and a lot of times it's not very kind. So yeah, the fact that it also has high base attack is nice, because Navia is an attack scaling damage dealer, and having the high base attack with all the other attack boosts that she's getting in her own kit means that characters like Bennett, even though you don't need to use her with Navia and you can use other characters, all those attack boosts that she's getting is making it so if you're not using Bennett with Navia, you're not missing out quite as much, because she's got her own attack boost from her kit, and then she's getting extra attack boost from this weapon as well. So that kind of makes up if you can't use Bennett with Navia, if you're using her using him on another team and can't spare him for her team for some reason. So overall, these 5 stars are pretty good. If nothing else, they're just good stat sticks. Now, let's talk about the 4 stars, because that is also kind of interesting. They are the things that you'll be getting along the way if you do decide to wish for these 5-star weapons. And honestly, right now, most of these weapons are not very good. The Widsith is the best weapon here. It's the catalyst. The Widsith, especially with high refinements, can be an insanely strong catalyst that rivals a lot of 5-star catalysts. It's also a very good weapon for a lot of characters that want the crit damage but don't have good access to it if you don't have if you don't have a 5-star catalyst weapon. So Widsith with a subset of crit damage and either giving you a lot of attack percent, elemental damage, or EM can be very nice and very helpful. Widsith would work very well on a character like Varessa. It could work very well on like a DPS Nahida, or really just any DPS catalyst that cares about attack percent, EM, and damage percent. If you have a character that wants all three, that's great. If you have a character like Nouvelette who only benefits from one of those, which is the damage percent, then it's a lot less good, but at the very least it does give you that 54 crit damage at level 90, which does make it very useful as just an extra way to get almost a second type of circlet amount of crit damage. So can be useful just for the crit damage, but ideally you want a character that's using all of its potential 3 buffs that it can give you, so you can really get the maximum value out of it. So yeah, pretty solid catalyst overall. Definitely, if you were wishing on this banner, you'd want to see a lot of Widsiths. The next weapon you'd probably want to see is the Dockhand's Assistant. It's the sword. The Sasageo Attack on Titan sword. It's kind of hard to see because the Widsith is blocking it, but it's this sword right here, and the blade looks like a retractable / breakable like razor blade. It's an HP sword, and that's really all you need to know because that's why it's useful. It is a sword, and the substat is HP percent, so that means it's really good for Layla. It's really good for Nilou if you have Nilou. It can be good for for Farina if you have Farina. And you have enough energy recharge for Farina and you just want some extra HP percent, that can be good there. We don't have a good HP sword other than a gotcha sword, so really this is kind of it. Honestly, the rest of these weapons, they're not really that good. They're fairly niche. I have the portable power saw, the Claymore. I put that on Dea because it is an HP Claymore and it can give you some elemental mastery as well. And I built my Dea as an EM Burgeon Dea, so she just has a lot of EM, like 870 EM and HP percent, and that's her build. So yeah, this is what I use on her, but these others, like, they're not particularly that good, and you know, instead of having these bows, you'd rather see like Favlance and Favbow or Stringless or something like that rather than these like the Prospector's Drill and the Range Gauge, like. Yeah. So if you're wishing on this banner, you'd want to see a lot of Widsith, and you'd want to see a couple Dockhand's Assistants for some HP sword characters. So the main thing from these banners overall, if we were to grade these weapon banners, the 5 stars, very solid, very good, can be useful on just about anyone who wants to deal damage. So just really nice overall as just solid stat sticks, if nothing else. 4 stars, Widsith really good, Dockhand's Assistant pretty useful. Other 4 stars, the other 3, not very good, pretty niche, really not that useful. I would not really recommend wishing on this weapon banner unless you had a Claymore character that you really liked and used a lot, and then also a Spear character that you really liked and used a lot, and you could potentially use one of these 2 5 stars. Keep in mind that when you wish and you get a 5 star on the weapon banner, there's still a 25% chance you get neither, and you get a standard 5 star like the Aquila Favonia or Skyward Pride or something like that. So it may not be what you want. You still do take a little bit of a risk, but if you have a Claymore character that would appreciate the higher base attack and crit rate on the Claymore, and if you have a Spear character that would like the crit damage and then the attack boost after using their skill, then these could be pretty useful. But the 4 stars, not that good. 2 out of 5 being useful, and 1 being useful only because we don't have an alternative really means that it's just the Widsith that's the most useful. As soon as we get, like, if we ever get a craftable 4-star sword, then the Dockhand's Assistant basically becomes a sword that we don't ever need. So yeah, it's basically just 1 and then this HP sword for the few HP sword or few HP scaling sword characters. And then onto the character banner. It's not the best, but honestly, it's better than I expected. So Aoife, he's going to be more of a character you play for fun, not someone who's going to be super relevant in really, really difficult content, but a pretty solid and fun character. Auroran's going to be nice in a lot of different situations. Off-field damage, can hold the Scroll of Cinder City set, and can deal Night Soul aligned damage, which can help against certain Netland bosses and enemies. And Layla's just a very solid shielder. So overall value for account-wise, I feel like the character banner is better, especially if you're wishing for Escoffier, and just for her pretty solid use in just about any team. Her being an off-field damage dealer and healer is very nice, and then her insane passive for a freeze team with only Hydro and Cryo makes her really, really strong. But again, as I said in my video about the review, even if you're not using her in a Cryo and Hydro only team, she still has quite a bit of value. So overall, this is a pretty solid banner. If you're wishing on this one for Navia, the 4 stars here are not quite as useful for Navia, but they are, at least like Aoife and Auroran, work well together, and Layla's just nice for your account in general. So between the two, the character banner does have a bit more value for your account, but the weapon banner's not bad, provided you get one of these two 5-star weapons. So yeah, we finally got all these right before they come out, and at least they're not terrible.